Why do the police provide bad service? When I ask people this, I often get answers like, because they're poorly trained, because they're control freaks who want to make a career out of dominating others, or they just care about getting a paycheck. While there is some level of truth to all those answers, those more so describe the symptoms of the problem rather than the source.
Oh my! Yeah, that's fruit. I got it all on camera.
Before we go on any further, it's important to understand this basic fact. Every service is a business, and there are two types of businesses, ones that are funded by force and ones that are funded by consent. To illustrate it a little differently, imagine a business that threatens you with violence if you don't pay for its service. Imagine that if they did something you didn't approve of or consent to, you couldn't just unsubscribe to it, because eventually they will send men with guns to break into your house, lock you in a cage, and shoot you if you try to resist. While this sounds awful, because it is, this describes the only difference between a government service and a free market service. This is the reality of all taxation. We can do mental gymnastics all we want to try to say otherwise, but this is still the case every time. The business motto is basically this: we'll decide what you want, and then we are going to make you pay for it. In other words, do it or we hurt you. From the beginning, it's already a bad business-consumer relationship. When you are forced to fund something at the threat of being physically locked in a cage, that's no different than being held hostage. This is why it's common to see videos of cops treating the people who pay their salaries like human cattle. This is why they pepper spray and electrocute people who are having medical emergencies. This is why they steal more from U.S. citizens than all burglars combined. There is no freedom of association when it comes to government service providers. The major difference between government services and free market services is that we can freely choose to terminate the relationship at any time and never do business with them again. This is why free market services are far better than government services. Because consumers have options in a free market, service providers are compelled to do a good job in order to keep our business. That is not currently the case with the institution of the police or any other government service in existence. In the case of the police, they can basically behave however they want and still at the end of the day get a government paycheck at the expense of everyone. Thanks to government, they get our business whether they do what we want them to do or not. Just imagine if when the police did something awful to the community, they would lose funding and no longer get our business. Just imagine that anytime they kill someone unjustly, we could choose to stop paying them. Perhaps they would actually care about what the community wants. But instead, they receive our money through forced wealth redistribution no matter what. Welcome to socialism.
I'm laying there screaming, asking somebody to help my granddaughter because he just shot her in the head. And he wouldn't even help her. They turned on the light and seen that she had been shot.
Charges facing police officer Joseph Weekly have been officially dropped. Weekly is the Detroit cop who shot and killed Ayanna Jones during a raid at her home.
They require you to pay taxes even when they don't do their part. If they f*** up, guess who's on the hook? The taxpayers. You. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, you can always sue. Sure, you can. But even if you win, guess who's going to pay the bill? Not the police department, the taxpayers. You can't have accountability by establishing a monopoly that you can't stop paying for. Do you really want to be forced to give these people a paycheck?
Segregation was a crime in the 50s. Would you enforce that law?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't be an officer back then at that time.
Exactly.
If it was, I would enforce it, though.
You would enforce it?
Absolutely.
If you would enforce the segregation law?
I don't make the laws, I just enforce them, sir.
Now, that's not to say that all police are bad. There are plenty of people who join the police force with good intentions. Unfortunately, though, at the end of the day, they end up just enforcing the scribbles of politicians while using the Nuremberg defense. Socialism is just a government monopoly that you are forced to pay for at gunpoint. I'd much rather the services I subscribe to be consensual. Saying pay for this service or go to prison is not at all synonymous with freedom, and you don't make a service better by monopolizing it. But let me know what you think. Is forcing people to pay for a service really a good way to keep them accountable? If you agree or disagree, tell me why in a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. If we saw other countries forcing people to pledge their undying allegiance to an object, we would call that brainwashing. But don't ever say that about the Pledge of Allegiance, because this guy will rant on the internet about how offended he is that you have the choice of whether or not you want to exercise the free speech of reciting a love poem to a cloth.
My name is Deputy Vanderveer with the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, I've heard of you.
Okay. Have you had anything to drink tonight, sir?
I have the right to remain silent.